Hey everyone, it's Ben. Hope everyone's having a nice day. Just recently, about a little over a week ago, I went to Santa Cruz, which, as most people know, is where a lot of the exterior shots for the movie The Lost Boys were done. And I took some video of the boardwalk and the pier and some of the areas that were used as locales in the film. And it got me thinking about, hey, I've never talked about The Lost Boys. I've talked about Salem's Lot, I've talked about Fright Night, but The Lost Boys was one of the other seminal vampire movies of my generation. And I think it's important to talk about it, as well as talking about its two more recent sequels. So this will be my overview of the Lost Boys franchise. This pan, ooh. Yeah. Lost Boys. Max's video still here. So The Lost Boys was released in the summer of 1987. It was directed by Joel Schumacher and it was produced by Richard Donner. The story was by Janice Fisher and James Jeremias, and the screenplay was by the same duo as well as Jeffrey Boom. The original story, based on the documentary on this DVD, was that it was more akin to the Goonies, where it was a bunch of little kids fighting vampires, and Joel Schumacher thought it would be more interesting if it was teenagers, so he did a little bit of a retooling of the script. The film, the story of the Lost Boys revolves around Sam, Michael, and their mother, Lucy, who relocate from Arizona to her father's cabin or house in Santa Carla, California, which is the murder capital of the world. Lucy has gone through a divorce, and she relocates there to start her life anew. During that time, Michael comes into contact with a biker gang led by David Kiefer Sutherland, and also falls for a young woman named Star, who is sort of attached to the biker gang. What you later come to find out is that the biker gang are vampires, and they have tricked
As for
Michael.
Sam,
he falls in with the Frog Brothers, played by Jameson Newlander and Corey Feldman. And they are convinced that Santa Carla is crawling with vampires. Sam, of course, laughs this off, but they keep giving him periodicals about vampire lore. And once his brother starts displaying these vampire-like signs, Sam turns to the Frog Brothers for help. Now, I've been a fan of The Lost Boys like most people my age. The first time they saw it, I loved the Frog Brothers characters. I was a big fan, of course, of Corey Feldman at the time. He was, again, the real draw for me to come in and watch this film. Of course, I knew who Kiefer Sutherland was from Stand By Me, and I was still very afraid of him, and I thought he did a great job as David in the movie. I also like Jason Patric as Michael. You really feel for what he's going through, and once he realizes that he's entered into this world of vampires, and he's not going to be able to get out of it, just because he has the hunger to feed, and that will eventually lead him to become a full-fledged vampire. I thought Jamie Gertz was great as Star. Corey Haim was awesome as Sam. It was outside of Lucas, I really hadn't seen him in too much. I guess Silver Bullet was another one I would have seen him in, but I thought he was great as Sam, and the dynamic between the two brothers, Michael and Sam, is really great. Diane Wiest is wonderful as Lucy. She's just such a typical mom, and being raised by my mom, being a single mom, it's like I really, she reminded me a lot of my mom in many ways, and Edward Herrmann as Max is really good in the film as well, as is Bernard Hughes as the grandfather. He's a great hoot in this movie, and he had some outside of the Frog Brothers. I think he had the best lines in the film. Now, for me as a kid, this was one of the first movies that I realized was shot close to where I lived. It was shot in Santa Cruz, and I was really angry that I wasn't there to see them film this and meet some of these wonderful actors. But it was really, I thought the atmosphere of the Santa Cruz area was done very well in this film. I also think it's a very scary film, and I think it's the kind of vampire movie I miss, because there aren't a lot of vampire movies like this anymore. Yeah, it's one of those films that just has never gotten old with me, and I loved the film. I had hoped that there would have been a sequel a long time ago, because I thought there was so much potential for one with the remaining characters at the end of the film. It's sad that we would have to wait as long as we did. It would take 20 years for them to make a Lost Boys sequel, and the sequel that they eventually did made was really not worth the time, in my opinion. Now, before I get into the sequel, I'll show some of these Lost Boys things I have. These were put out by NECA. It's Michael right there. You could switch their heads out and have them be the non-vampire Michael, and then, of course, David over here, who's my favorite. But I prefer them with the vampire look, and I'll pick them up so you guys can see them a bit better. And then David comes with, of course, the bottle that he gives to Michael in the film that's got David's blood in it. Really good likeness. Really looks like Kiefer did in the movie. Of course, it's got the Chinese food that was worms. So yeah, I really like these. So from here we go on to the 2007 release of Lost Boys: The Tribe, which was the sequel to the original. So Lost Boys: The Tribe actually came out in 2008. It was a direct-to-DVD release. The film stars Tad Hilgenbrink as Chris Emerson, Autumn Reeser as Nicole Emerson, and Angus Sutherland as Shane. And also features a cameo kind of appearance, but actually just sort of, he's not really in the film very much, but Corey Feldman does return as Edgar Frog from the original film. They first started talking about a Lost Boys sequel in the late 80s, right after the original had come out. One of the original story ideas was going to be, and this was when Joel Schumacher wanted to do it, was called Lost Girls, and it never came to par. They even mention it in the special edition of the original film. This film came on the heels of the Two Coreys reality show with Corey Haim and Corey Feldman. There was even mention of it in the film that Corey Feldman had been, or in the show that Corey Feldman had been offered to do a cameo in a Lost Boys sequel, which was actually a remake, and he was just going to have a cameo in it, but he turned it down. And then I think through the course of the popularity of the Two Coreys show, they decided they wanted to do a sequel and have Corey Feldman play the Edgar Frog character. The other ideas for a sequel the other ideas for another Lost Boys was actually going to be a prequel about David and how he became a vampire. The Tribe is not a good movie. There's a couple things I like about it, but in terms of waiting 19 years, it was pretty much a really slap in the face to fans of the original film. This is almost like it's almost like a remake of the original, just with less interesting characters and a lot of stale plots. The two main characters are boring as anything else. I've never been a big fan of Tad Hilgenbrink. I saw him in The Hills Run Red, and he was actually pretty interesting in that, but other than that, never been a fan of him. The brother-sister dynamic didn't really work very well. And Angus Sutherland I've never seen in anything else, but my thoughts were that they brought him into this just because he is, Kiefer Sutherland's brother, and that was going to be the basis for people seeing this film, because he was going to be the new main vampire. Corey Feldman is good in the few scenes that he's in. But there was so much that got cut out of this film. Originally, Jameson Newlander was supposed to be in the film. His scenes were cut out as Alan Frog. And then Corey Haim had a much longer scene in the film that was going to be part of the finale. And he does make a very small cameo in the film, but what was originally supposed to be in the film was, again, cut completely. And I think it would have made for a much more interesting follow-up to this film. I think what a lot of people are not aware of is that Hans Rodionoff, who wrote the screenplay for this film, actually helped develop a comic book series that was put out right before the film was released. The book series was called Reign of Frogs. It was a 4-issue limited series. And what it was is it kind of bridged the gap between Lost Boys 1 and 2. There was a lot more exposition in this book series than in this film, and I wish they could have made this movie, even if they made it an animated movie, it would have been better than what The Tribe turned out to be. Because the whole thing about The Tribe is that what it is that Chris and Nicole are, they lost their parents, and they end up moving to where their aunt lives in Luna Bay, and they rent like a house or a cabin from her. And then, of course, Nicole falls in with this surfer biker gang led by Shane, and ends up sort of going through the same motions that Michael went with David's group in the first movie. She drinks Shane's blood and she starts to become a vampire. And then Chris, who is a former hotshot surfer, he falls in with Edgar Frog, who is mourning the loss of his own brother. You never know how, but you assume it's by vampires or what happened. And then he falls in with him, and Edgar Frog is now running like a surfboard shaping business, and they sort of band together to stop the vampire. I mean, it's the same movie. It's the same movie as the original, just with less flair and less good performances, in my opinion. With the comic book series, it was really interesting because it picks up where, right before the proceedings in The Tribe, and Edgar is sort of surfboard shaping and doing things like that, and he comes upon this kid who wants to be his new partner, and he begins to tell him stories about him and Alan fighting vampires, and it involves Sam and the grandfather from the Lost Boys movies. And I don't want to give a lot of it away, but it was a really good comic book series. But the one thing I will say, and this is why what I think was sorely lacking in terms of exposition in The Tribe, is that Chris and Nicole are supposed to be the children of Star and Michael, and that was never really cleared. And the other thing was that the Shane character was actually supposed to be one of the people that was attacked on the beach by the Lost Boys in the first movie, that he was bitten by David, and that he was not killed. And that would have been really interesting if they could have brought that up in the movie, because I think it would have made the movie so much better. It was such a disappointment. They could have used Corey Feldman so much more. He was the best part of the film. There were a couple of neat homages to the guy that was playing the saxophone on the beach in the original Lost Boys. You kind of see him now. There was just a couple of little things like that, but just the whole feeling of this film was just generic and forced and cheap, and there was just nothing redeeming about it. I mean, it just is a pretty piss poor sequel, in my opinion. Just give everyone a look at some of the artwork in the comic books. There's the Frog Brothers right there, and actually this image was used in the opening for the third sequel to the movie. You get to see the Frog Brothers in action. I think that's what everybody wanted in the second movie, and I don't know why the producers decided to make a carbon copy of the original film. We wanted to see the Frog Brothers fight. The book series was really good. I'll show some of the covers off. Here's one, and this is where David comes back, which I thought was a great story. I got 2 of pretty much every issue. There's another one. And then the final one, which I thought was really good. Really good book story. So from here, we have the third sequel, The Thirst.